Today I'll show you how to turn a sweet potato into some really yummy gnocchis. They're vegan and gluten-free, and they have the traditional flavor and texture of a gnocchi. First we bake the sweet potato in the oven. I crumble up my parchment paper and then spread it out on the baking tray, and it will stay where you put it. Usually I can fit about 6 pounds into a baking tray, but it depends on the size of the sweet potatoes. It's like a puzzle. You need to move them around to see if you can fit all of them in there. So let's take them to the oven. Then we bake the sweet potatoes for an hour and a quarter. Give them about 200 Celsius, that's 400 Fahrenheit. I poke them to see if they are tender, and if it moves smoothly through the sweet potato, they are done. When the sweet potatoes are cooled down so much that I can hold it in my hand without burning myself, I remove the skin by cutting the ends off, and then I slice my knife in under the skin and cut it open, and then I remove it twice like this. You can wear a grill buff by removing the skin if you're short in time and can't wait for it to cool down completely. And if I see something like this, I just cut it away. And this brown part is not something bad, it's just that it's been almost caramelized. It's just the sweetness in the sweet potatoes. I like to blend my sweet potato puree so it gets really smooth, but you can also mash it with a potato smasher or potato ricer. And if you don't have any of those, you can just use a fork. When I blend the sweet potatoes, I use my tamper. And I'll explain before I turn it on because it will be very noisy. And I tamper it like this, but I also do circles like this to make the sweet potatoes move around. Sometimes you might need to add a little bit of water, but try to add as little as possible because you want the sweet potato puree to be as thick as possible. If the puree is too watery, you will need to add too much flour to the gnocchi dough and it will just be, it's not a good result. So try to avoid using too much water. When the blender can move the sweet potatoes by itself and you see it sucking down in the middle, then you can stop using the tamper and let it blend until it's really smooth. When the puree is nice and smooth, I transfer it into the small glass containers. It's 180 milliliters at 3/4 of a cup. I store them in my freezer and it's just the perfect size for 2 portions of gnocchis. So if I will have gnocchi for dinner, I will take one from the freezer the night before and defrost it in the refrigerator. So from 1.5 kilo, 3 pounds of sweet potatoes, I get around 6 of these small containers. So the whole baking tray will make 12 of these. Now you might be thinking, I don't need that many gnocchis, but the puree can also be used for my sweet potato waffles or my crispy pizza crust. So I find it really handy to have a lot of puree in the freezer for a fast, satiating, fat-free meal without no foods. So we just pop this in my freezer, and the rest of the sweet potato puree I will use for the gnocchi today. Now let's make the gnocchi dough. This recipe is for 2 servings of gnocchis, so you can either make 2 starters, 1 small lunch, or 1 big main course. So I transfer the rest of the potato puree into a bowl, and I use my magic scraper. It's just so good. I can get in all the angles and corners, so I can get all of the puree out of the blender. This is the ingredients. And as you can see, it's a bit more cassava flour than potato starch. And that's because if we add too much potato starch, the gnocchis, they will get rubbery or chewy, like a gummy bear. And we will like light gnocchis that has like a bite to it, like al dente pasta. On the other hand, if we add too much cassava flour, the gnocchis will get too dry and they will break up stirring the sauce or while replacing them. It's important that you start by adding only half of each of the flours and to check the consistency along the way. I will add the rest of the potato starch. Mix it around. Then I will add half of what is left of the cassava flour because the cassava flour can make it really dry. But let's see how it turns out. I think it's good now. You can check the consistency of the gnocchi dough by rolling a ball of it between your hands or on a wooden cutting board. And if it's really sticky, it will need a little more flour. Then add a little more flour and try again, and a little more flour. You don't want to get it too dry, but also not too wet. So now I'm testing the gnocchi dough, and you can see it's a little bit sticky, but not much. So it's actually perfect consistency as it is right now. You might wonder if you can use another kind of flour than cassava flour. I tried with arrowroot flour and it doesn't really work. It gets too soft and it gets a bit more sticky than if you use cassava flour. Also, cassava starch doesn't work. So if you have a really white cassava flour, it might be cassava starch and it might not turn out that good. I tried a lot of brands of cassava flour and it's my experience that a kind that's light brown like this, it will work for the recipe. Tapioca flour, it doesn't work for this recipe. When you add it to the sweet potato puree, it would just disappear and you can just add on, and it will never be a dough. So stick to cassava flour combined with potato starch and you will get really fine gnocchis. Then I'll take my gnocchi ball and I roll it into a tube on my cutting board. I find that the easiest way to get the tube even is spreading your fingers while you're rolling it. But we need to roll the gnocchis once again, so it doesn't need to be that accurate. I think this is fine. I'll just get a knife and I'll cut it up. I cut them like the tip of my thumb, but it's really up to you what size you like. Just try to cut them so they will be about the same size, because then they will be finished cooking at the same time. Then I roll the smaller pieces between my palms. You just continue like this until you finished up all the dough and all the dough is turned into small gnocchis. So now all the gnocchi bits are rolled into balls and we're ready to roll them on the gnocchi board to make the grooves. If you don't have a gnocchi board like this, you can use a fork to make the ridges or grooves on the gnocchis. And if you're in a hurry, you can just roll them to balls or ovals, or you can just cut them in squares. The taste and texture will still be absolutely fabulous. When I roll it on the gnocchi board, I press a little bit so it will get this oval shape. And you see they got these really nice grooves as traditional gnocchis. The job of the grooves is to hold as much sauce onto the gnocchis as possible. And if you want to optimize this ability, you can press with your thumbs while you're rolling it on the gnocchi board or on the fork. And this will create a small hole on the backside of the gnocchi to hold a lot of sauce. But I find it sufficient just to make the grooves, and it's also a bit faster. This recipe equals 2 portions of gnocchi dough, and tonight I'm only cooking for myself, so I will store the rest of the gnocchi dough in a small container in the refrigerator. And then I have gnocchi doughs to make really fast gnocchis tomorrow. And actually tomorrow I think I will make my spicy zucchini tomato sauce, and I'll make a video for you so you can find it on my channel really soon. You can store the ready-to-cook gnocchis in a glass container in the refrigerator and put parchment paper in between the layers so the gnocchis won't stick together. Cut it into shape of the container. And then, I always crumble my parchment paper. It just stays more put when I do that. And I have it ready for my second layer. The first layer I will put on the bottom of the glass container. When I store them in glass container, I roll them directly into the container. Try to even out the gnocchis so they won't touch each other because they can stick together in the refrigerator. And then I measure my parchment paper to my glass container and I make a bend. And I sharpen it with my nail. Then I put it in the glass container like this. The rest of the parchment paper stick out. And then I just continue rolling the gnocchis into the container. I fold it back one more time and I just lift it up and I press the fold so it will stay put. And I just continue rolling my gnocchis into the glass container. So this is 1 portion of gnocchis. And if you think it's time-consuming to make gnocchis yourself, I timed it while I shaped these gnocchis, and it took me 10 minutes and 3 seconds to roll all of these gnocchis up and store them in the container. So that's pretty fast, I think. For me, it's definitely worth spending 10 minutes at this and getting gluten-free healthy gnocchis without no foods. This is a great meal prep if you're serving the gnocchis for a lot of people. I once made gnocchis for 10 people to medical medium potluck, and I made them the night before and stored them in a big glass container I used for my celery, and I served them the next day for lunch, and they were just perfect and everybody loved them. You can store the gnocchi dough or the already shaped gnocchis in the refrigerator for a couple of days, but they don't store well in the freezer. It's only the sweet potato puree that store well in the freezer. If you freeze the gnocchi dough, it gets more wet, so when you defrost it, you will need to add more flour. And it will make the gnocchi dough and the final gnocchis heavier. And we're looking for light gnocchis, so I won't recommend that. So now we're done rolling our gnocchis and they're ready to cook. You can either cook them in boiling water for 3 minutes, or as I prefer, to cook it in my favorite pasta sauce for 4 to 5 minutes to make it a 1-pot meal. So I take them from my gnocchi board, my cutting board, not my gnocchi board. And I transfer them into the water. The gnocchis are colder than the boiling water, so it will lower the temperature when you transfer the gnocchis. So when you transfer them, put on a lid to get the heat back on boiling and time it for 3 minutes. And as you can see, they will gather at the bottom of the pot. You can give them a gentle stir to make sure they don't stick together. When the gnocchis come to the surface, you will cook them for about a minute and then they will be done. Some of the gnocchis are beginning to come to the surface. I will wait until all of them are coming up. It's about now, so I will give it a taste. The gnocchi still taste a bit like cassava flour, so we'll need another minute. So just pop on the lid and let them cook for about a minute, and then I'll taste them again. So now it's been another minute. And I get one of the gnocchis If they're different size, try to take one of the big ones, because otherwise maybe the small one would be cooked, but the big ones won't. They're perfect. So good. So turn out the heat. As you can see, the gnocchis, they will get a bit bigger while they're cooking. That's why I make them quite small. Try to let them drip off in your, I don't know what this is called in English, but try to let them drip off so you won't get so much water into your plate. So now the gnocchis are ready. Don't they look yummy? And I will give it a taste. This is good. They have just the right texture. They are not gooey or rubbery. And they have this exact flavor of traditional gnocchis, you know, with gluten. I just love them. You would never guess that these are made without grains or gluten. They're just perfect. Try the gnocchis with your favorite pasta sauce or dump them in a soup for an extra finish. If you're looking for ideas for a fat-free pasta sauce, check out my creamy sage and garlic sauce. It's really yummy. And if you don't see it yet, it's just because I will upload it really soon. So keep an eye out for my channel or subscribe and you will get notified when I upload the video. Until next time, stay healthy and take care.